All right, guys, in this video, we're going to take a look at what we were sent by the drummer and how we turned that into what we used for the record, how we mixed it. So there's a little bit of editing involved for this mixing technique. These are the live toms, and I'm going to show you how I cleaned that up. First things first, we're going to take a listen in solo. We've got a rack and two floor toms here, and I'm going to show you these top three that are soloed now are the completely unedited toms that were a part of the original drum files from the session drummer we hired out of Los Angeles. So let's take a listen to those from this fill. One more time. Okay, cool. You'll notice these are going to the tom bus and they're being treated with the same exact processing as these three toms. These are the exact same three tracks, but I've eliminated the bleed. I've deleted that, and I've gone through and I've done a technique where I'm going to low pass, remove the highs after the initial attack of the tom, and we're going to take a listen to that, and this is what those toms became after the editing and mixing. One more time. Very cool. So you can hear there's not a lot of difference sonically because they're the same exact toms going through the same exact processing for the most part. But what you do have is you've got just the hits themselves, and then I've got the resonance, the rumble, the good stuff of the decay and sustain of the tom is still intact with the toms that we ended up using. So let's take a closer look at how we achieve that. Let me go ahead and turn these guys off. We'll mute those for a second. Get rid of those. Let's come up here to the floor tom, highlight this stuff. And pretty simply what I'm doing is I'm just going tom by tom and I'm removing all of the bleed. So I'm going to do it for this fill, and then you guys can take it over and do it for the remaining if you like the sound of it. But I'm going to shift tab to transient. I'm going to kind of delete that, and then I'm going to allow the tail end of that, the first tom, to resonate just beyond the hit from the second tom. So you can see that. This tom's not hitting anything at all. We're just going to get that out of the way. This guy right here, we're going to bring it up nice and tight, and we're going to let that resonate until about here. Listen to this on the floor tom when it hits, and then the snare hits back here. Cool. For this song, I wanted to be able to have a really tight, clean snare drum in the middle. And I wanted to, if any room sound was there, I wanted it to come from the room mics or from the Ocean Way plugin that I use a lot for creating a live natural drum sound. So I want to get rid of the high end from the cymbal. Listen to the tom hit one more time. The floor tom hits, boom, the cymbal crashes right after the hit. Okay, in the mix, I want the high end of the overheads to be my cymbal mics, so to speak, in this song. Sometimes I'll use the overheads for an image of the whole kit, and that's great. But in this song, the tool that I wanted to use, the technique that I wanted to use, was to keep the floor tom or any of the toms high end, snare, or any cymbal bleed from impacting the overall tone of what I was shaping with the overheads and the rest of the kit. So get the toms in, get them out, but I don't want to lose. A lot of guys, you'll see them come in here and they'll kind of choke it to death. So they'll delete this, and then they'll delete this guy, and you'll have something like this. Cool. And so it's doom, doom, and they're in, they're out. I like that sound sometimes for fast fills, blast fills, or where you've got rolls on the toms where the drummer's playing them quickly. I think that sounds great whenever you do that. Put your fades in, call it a day. For a song like this where there's a looseness and there's a backbeat vibe, it's got a nice groove to it, I think it works well to have resonance in these toms and for them to just kind of decay. We can time that with a fade and treat it the way that we want to treat it. But I'm going to undo what I did there, and I've got another technique. A buddy of mine from Indiana showed me this technique, and I'll give a shout out to him, Azimuth Recording Studios in Indianapolis, Indiana. My buddy Ryan Atkins, incredible engineer, producer, music mind, did some projects together. I believe it was him who showed me this. I know there's a few ways to do this technique that are floating out on the internet, tons of ways to skin the cat, but for this particular song, I'm going to show you exactly what I did. I broke down each tom hit like this, and then what I would do is I would tab the transient to that snare, break the snare, and then I would make a fade depending upon how long I wanted that tom to resonate. Get that stuff out of the way, just so we're not even looking at this. Then what I'll do is I'll solo that tom and I'll listen to just the resonance. Okay, the cymbal at about there, somewhere in here, the cymbal's starting to so we're going to highlight that section there. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to open up an EQ audio suite for you Pro Tools guys. If you're not Pro Tools, however you would pull open and render or process an effect to the track, that's what you're going to want to do here. So for now, I've got a default that shows up with that. Let's go ahead and get rid of it. I'm just going to take this. I'm going to set it to maybe like a 6 dB slope so I retain some of it. And I'm just going to remove the top end, pretty much everything above 300-400. I don't want to listen to that. Here's without it. Hear all the cymbal bleed. Very cool. So what this is going to do, we're going to process it. And then, like the good editors that we are, we're going to throw a little clip in there, a little crossfade. Let's take a listen to just this hit. Before, after. Cool. That's it. That's the tom trick. So what that allows me to do is to retain the sustain, to keep the tom low end ringing out. I want that to remain there. I want it to ring, but it eliminates having that cymbal bleed or any snare bleed from that particular tom hit. So we get the attack, we get the brightness. Now we can boost the top end for the attack, like you're going to see in a second. What I've done, you can boost the high end without it impacting any of that cymbal bleed. If we would have taken this hit and we would have boosted the top end with the cymbal bleed there, you're boosting all that high end in the cymbals, and they're becoming even more upfront, and they're taking more of a lead in the cymbal mics. And then your tom mics become a supplement as well to the snare mics and the snare triggers that we're using, which in this case I did not want. Sometimes you want snare bleed in them. In this case I didn't. So take that little 6 dB per octave low pass filter, high cut, around 400 worked well. And I just would go through and process that for every single one of these tom hits until I get what we have down here in these three. So I'm going to hide and make inactive these. Watch that back and hit the rest of those toms. In this case, they've actually already been done for you, but for future reference, you have that tool in your shed now. And one more time, these are the toms the way that they are after editing. Very cool. So you get a nice clean ring, you get a nice sustain, and all is well with the toms. Now, we're going to break down what I did. That's what this course is all about. And very simply, I put a low-cut, high-pass filter at around 45 for each of these toms. They're identical. A lot of times, I will EQ each tom differently. In this case, I felt like they were recorded so well and the toms were tuned so well that I didn't have to go in, and I didn't really find it necessary to pull different frequencies out of whichever toms. I felt like they all sounded clean, they all resonated well, and it worked for me and for this song. One thing to mention is a lot of times drummers will kind of throw makeshift kits together. Their toms, maybe you may have I mix a lot of gospel stuff, and sometimes I get these small 8 and 10 inch toms, and they're of one brand, and then a different for the 12, 14, 16, 18. They're all tuned differently, they're resonating differently, and you got to be a little bit more surgical with the EQ. So where I may have a rack tom that for whatever reason may have a nice tight low end and it may be punchy and boomy, I may have a floor tom that's flabby and flaky and just doesn't sound very good. So surgical EQ will help me to go in and do some stuff. But anyways, more on that to come. For this song, they sounded great. I'm sending each of these a little bit to the room, which is down here, the Ocean Way, and we'll see that here in a minute. But we'll come back and show you that. We'll focus now on these 3 toms go out to toms. That's my aux right here. Stereo aux, toms, and then that goes to the all drums. I've got VCC slate just set to the default setting. Looks like I drove the input a little bit. And then my Pro Q, like I told you, boosting the high, the top end. I found a frequency that I liked, and I boosted that. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll boost. Let's highlight this little fill right here and let it loop. Sometimes when I boost, I'll notice that I like to boost with a wider bell, a wider shape. And then if I hear something around the frequency that I'm boosting, I'll come in here and manipulate it a little bit like that with a wide cut, or even sometimes a tighter cut. And then what that allows me to do is to eliminate, if you boost an EQ with a tight band like this, it can work for kicks and it can work for toms a little bit, maybe if you want a little bit of a clicky sound. But for these toms, I felt like the wider band just felt more natural. It felt a little bit more smooth of a boost. So what I did is this, and then if I were to hear something in the lower range of this, the upper mids and the highs here, what I would do is I would take a cut and then just kind of find what it is I want to cut and dip that down a little bit. But in this case, we didn't have to do that. So I'll try to stay on task for us. That's just a boost. Let's see the before and after with this guy. You can hear just a little bit more of that click coming through the stick on the head. Give us some clarity so that it sits on top of the mix. Moving from there, we've got the FabFilter Pro MB. And I've stated this on the YouTube channel in a video. I showed the how I'm mixing toms. And this is the go-to preset for me that I copied over from the Waves C6. The Waves C6 has a few tom presets, and I think this one was called Floor Tom 1. And I wish there was more of an explanation of why I use it and why I picked it, but I would cycle through the presets. It's something that I found that I liked, and I stuck with it. To explain it, you can see I'm using this almost like an EQ. This preset is set up to be an EQ that helps to kind of tame any resonances in any one of these bands to keep it under control. So up here you've got quite a big boost at the 55. What are we starting that boost at about 100? So you're increasing about 10 dB of lows and subs, but it's compressing that. Watch what happens when I hit it. So it won't let that low end get too muddy. It won't let it get too extreme because it's going to compress or push it down. But for softer hits, it's going to allow it to resonate in that frequency range, and it's going to allow it to have that sustain. So these are, hitting it pretty decent. So the toms are getting boosted with the EQ, but then they're getting pushed back down whenever they exceed the threshold that is set right here. So that second hit for the floor tom, it helps to balance out the low end EQ in the toms. So by all means, I'm going to hit through each band and show you. There's a resonance here in the 100 to 200 range that this preset controls. Because you're boosting 100 and below, it's probably thinking, hey, let me control a little bit of that low mid stuff. By all means, I'll click through and let you guys see these settings. Pause and apply those if you guys are FabFilter Pro MB users. If you're Waves users and you've got the C6, the preset, if I remember correctly, is the Floor Tom 1 under drums. So other than just a little bit of click, again, some EQ and controlling the mids, this preset is, and then obviously this would be for that floor tom preset, the high band would be reducing some of the cymbal bleed is my thought. What that would be trying to control right here is probably a decently aggressive threshold. Yeah, so it's not really doing anything because we already cut out the stuff we didn't want. So anyways, nothing too scientific about that one. That's really a preset that I liked, and I selected it. This is where I like to have fun with toms. Multi-band transient designing. This is the Isotope Alloy 2. You can do this if you were to split the tracks, and so let's say you created a toms aux for lows, mids, and highs, and you put an EQ on. You could essentially filter out everything 150 and above on the first one, And then on your second track, everything 150 to 2K would be in, and then anything 2K and above would be in on your third track. If you have any questions with that, message me and I'll try to help you out with this. But if you've got the Bittersweet from Flux, if you've got, there's all kinds of, the SPL Transient Designer is great. I have that. Attacker is pretty cheap. It's affordable. Plug-in Mix makes a transient control modulator. That's really good. I like this because it's all in one right here. I pull it open. I've actually got it preset to where the Transient Designer is on and ready to go whenever I launch Alloy 2. But pretty much what this does for me, let's listen to the lows, and we're going to solo. So now you're only hearing 152 hertz and below. Let's bypass this. And with it. So it's probably not appropriate to bypass, and then we hear the full frequency range. Let's see what we got. We got 4.5 and minus 6.3. Here's with the Transient Designer. You feel it just pushes that low 150 and 2 and below. It's pushing, it's poking it at me, and I like that it gives it that thump, that punch. That's what I'm doing. I'm boosting the attack, and I'm cutting the sustain to control that sustain a little bit. Here's without it. And we'll raise it up. You hear the toms just ringing. It's still ringing, but it's got the attack is there, and then it's pulling it down almost like we're using a compressor or a gate to kind of pull back the sustain a little bit, and it's controlling it. So it's not ringing out, boom. It's kind of ringing out, boom. It's kind of giving it a little vibe there. You can't take yourself too seriously. And then in the mids, I'm boosting a little bit of attack, but with the toms in the mids, I try to be careful. I like toms that are a little bit hollow in the mids. I like it to be scooped there. Unless I'm working on like a 70s vibe and I want the mids to come through, maybe an indie rock track, I wouldn't cut so much of the mids like you saw me do in the other Pro MB. But the sustain, yet again, I'm going to control that. I'm going to pull that down, and then that click, that attack that we boosted in the 3K region or so, I'm going to push that up a little bit. Let's take a listen to that. That's more exciting than the mid band. You hear that now without it. With it. So it just brings out that clicky, stick hitting the head. And that's very simple in that. And then we're pulling the sustain just a little bit. I like to be able to control that. That's the preset from Alloy 2. Moving on from there, this is where it really gets fun. I'm going to try and level match this for you. Let's see if we can bypass this and hear the toms. Actually, we got to go back to Alloy 2 and unsolo that. Remove the solo. Now let's listen to the... Okay, so it's not too far off. The let's pull this guy up to like 3, and let's listen without it and with it. Yeah. Okay, so this is, I usually drive this a little bit harder, and I'm going to show you that, but the Studer for me is adding some gentle harmonics that are just helping it to be a little bit more warm, and it's got a little bit more character to it. If you want to rewind and play that back, you can hear that. Let your ear kind of get used to that. But subtle things, little subtle moves across the board that are going to help to contribute to the overall sound. Now watch when I drive this. I love the tone that the distortion gets whenever it starts to get gritty and break up. Yeah, you hear that? I like that sound. I like that distortion. Driving the pre a little bit, driving, in this case, the tape machine just to get that breakup. I feel like it adds a lot of character. I think it sounds really cool. And a lot of songs, This one I kept it a little bit cleaner just before the breakup, and that's just what I went with creatively for this particular song. But anyways, that's kind of the walkthrough of the toms. Sometimes I'll send the toms to the snare plate. In this case, I didn't. I had it there for that as an option. I did use the room sound, follow the main pan. You can see that here. It's following the exact panning position of these. That's going to be going into this room over here. Without it. With it. Very gentle. Here's with it. Boosted. And like I said before, with these drums, I wanted them to be clean, tight, and controlled. I didn't want anything to get too roomy or too out of hand, so I did not drive the toms into the room mics too much. So there's a walkthrough on the toms. I hope you guys are learning something from that. If anything, that trick of removing the high end is hopefully worth the price of admission for you on this video. But we're going to close this one up. We're going to move on over to the hi-hat, the metal, the overheads, and we're going to look at how we're controlling that and then sending that to the room mic to create a sweet sounding room.